Wow. What a tremendous blessing it is to be with you. I've been spending a lot of my time this year in troubled areas trying to get people to talk about how we can bring civility and healing and a sense of well-being and peace to various troubled communities. So I'm excited that this is not going to be a tense discussion, is it? Okay. Your laughter encourages me. But today I want to talk about something that's really foundational to everything we want to do. And I want to talk about really the reason why I am doing some of the things that I'm trying to do. I'm going to talk to you about the power of love, the healing power of love. In ancient Greek, we find that there are three major words that define love. One is eros, which is a romantic and sexual love. Another is philos, which deals with the idea of brotherly love. Philadelphia coming from that kind of word. And then there is the agape love, which is the love of God. It's self-sacrificing love. It's love that leaves its place of safety and it moves to really enter into somebody else's space and do good for them instead of harm. I want to quote Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "I decided to stick with love. Hate is too much a burden to bear." Now that's a powerful idea. Amen. That's worth a clap. Stick with love. What does that really look like? So I want to tell you a story. There's a young African-American man who's a World War II veteran. And after he served his time in the military, he went to college. First one in his family ever to go. He got to his senior year in school, was doing very, very well, and then he had an incident. With him, the incident was that a state trooper, Florida state trooper, accosted him and made him kneel down on his knees, took out his weapon, and then, bam, discharged that gun right over his head, temporarily deafening him. Then he said, "Boy, if I find out you're involved in this voter stuff anymore, next time I'm going to kill you." And he begins to run and move forward. As he is going down to his home, things flash through his mind. First, he remembers that there was a young man about a week before then that was tortured in that very same community, and it was an ugly scene. Then he began to think about, when he was growing up on a paper route, how that he was walked through the woods, and on two occasions, he saw black men hanging from trees who had been lynched. He also heard stories of folks who'd been set on fire and burned alive. Horrific. By the time he got to his home, he talked to his wife, and he looked at his infant child, and he said, "We're leaving here as soon as I graduate." So he went north, and after going north, many years later, he began to tell the story to his children of that time in Florida. I've got a confession to make to you, and that is this man that you're looking at actually was my father. And I'll never forget the story that he told my brother and I about race. He said, "Racism is an emotional disease." He said, "Anybody that has it is really corrupted." And he said, "I want you boys not to hate anyone. I need you to recognize that there are some good people that are white, bad people that are black." And he began to talk about the fact that the folks who encouraged him to do his absolute best were white folks who called him and told him, "You've got brains, you can go someplace." And ultimately, he responded. So he said, "Don't let racism get a hold of you." He lived out certain values in our home. You know, my dad was kind of a collector of people. And every few weeks, we would find somebody new was in our house. They were there from 2 weeks to 2 months, and they had all kinds of problems. Some of them were recovering weekend alcoholics. Others had gambling problems. Others had issues that they were trying to overcome within their own families. And he would work with them and simply be kind of a surrogate father figure. And the folks who graduated from the house found that they went on to better life. There actually was a guy who later on became a professor of economics at an Ivy League school who had gone to that graduate school in my father's basement. Isn't that awesome? But he also was engaged, remained engaged in voter registration and all the stuff of politics. So anytime election season came around, you'd see the following thing happen. There would be signs in our yard, a sign on our car. We had bumper stickers everywhere. You would have thought we were running for governor or something. But it was part of this feeling that engagement in the political realm was a privilege, a God-given right that we had in this form of government and in this great country. And so he was committed to that. So this agape love that I'm talking about for Harry Jackson Sr. had to do with personally touching people with potential where they hurt, helping them out, and then structurally dealing with the stuff that were structurally wrong by participating in the process. That's how he looked at things. And I think it is a great idea. When my father ultimately died at the ripe young age of 47 years old, his wife, my mother, took over and she moved into the space. And it's interesting that she had a passion for working with second grade and third grade boys, and she helped teach them about reading. Reading was her thing. And her idea is if you can't read, certainly you can't lead, you can't really survive, you can't get a job. And the statistics are telling us now that folks who wind up in prison, people that are having all kind of major problems from the minority communities into the mainstream, many of them are challenged in this area of reading, comprehension, and those kinds of things. So she did her part until after the age of 80, she was right there volunteering at the polls, helping other people vote. Isn't that fantastic? I was recently at a U2 concert. It was my very first time. I heard Bono. And it was very interesting. But he stood up at one point and he said, "Hey, I'm glad to be here in America. America's wonderful." And he said, "But America's not just a geographic spot." He said, "I believe that America is actually a state of mind. America is a way of thinking. And I'm glad to be here because of how this nation thinks and acts." I thought that that was an amazing statement, don't you? And I believe that my father would agree with that statement, that there's something about America. It's a great nation. And I know we've got to upgrade our engagement in making this nation even better. I know that there's some things that we have to improve. There is a power of love that you and I can engage in. It's something we can do. My meeting with the Reconciled Church Initiative has to do with us coming to various cities, trying to find leaders in the church, leaders in the community, leaders on the police force, various places, talking together, working together, and trying to come up with proven strategies of things that will work to reshape and to heal our communities. I don't have time to go into the details, but I want to let you know that there are some people in our country who are doing some absolutely fabulous things, and the love that they are manifesting is not eerie, speary, and spooky. It's pragmatic. It really is. They're dealing with stuff as how can prisoners come out of jail and reclaim their lives? How can we bring jobs back to the hood? How can we have educational enrichment that keeps kids from going off in the deep end and never finding their way back? I believe that there are things that individuals can do, like my father did, that churches can gather around and other community groups, and that we together collaboratively can build what I call bridges to peace. Bridges that will help us build the kind of America that we want to live in. And I believe that we can do this. We can heal the racial divide on our watch. We can change what America is going to look like. In a few years, there's going to be a browning of America, and we're going to have to decide whether all of us are going to be in this thing together, and we're going to create the kind of land that is welcoming, that is warm, that is healing, a land that we will be proud of. Before I give you a specific final set of instructions and suggestions that I think could help, I would love to give you my kind of interpretation of history of how Martin Luther King Jr. embodied the American spirit, and he did what many had done before him. And what was done was not just done by blacks. We need another MLK, but we need some white folk who take on the King mantle. We need some brown folk that will don the clothes of Martin Luther King. We need some people who are Hispanic and Asian and all kinds of folk who will make a difference. Think about this. 1740, the Great Awakening in America, was led by a guy named John Wesley. Wesley broke the rules by having slaves involved in his Bible studies. That was not allowed. He reached out to folks. He trained black preachers in a time where they weren't really preaching to blacks at the time in the 1700s. And tens of thousands of African Americans came to a revival awakening, and they were renewed. And he began to be a healing force. In that movement, another figure that is important to remember. Have you heard of a guy named Harry Hoosier? Anybody ever heard of Harry Hoosier? He's also called Black Harry. Believe it or not, he's a former slave. He was illiterate. He learned to be a preacher, and as a preacher, he began to preach the gospel to multiracial groups, and he absolutely impacted people by the thousands. And the way that they got the phrase that Indiana is the Hoosier state, you guessed it, that they named that moniker after this black preacher named Harry Hoosier. How many know about the story of Harriet Beecher Stowe? That she wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. It influenced all of New England to begin to think about the abolition of slavery. Up in Maine, they didn't know much about slavery. Weren't many black people up there. So they decided, though, that 1/10 of their population would enter the Civil War to fight for the abolition of slavery because they thought it was their Christian duty. On the battlefields, 1/10 of those folks actually died in war. At the end of the Civil War, one of the generals from Maine came back to D.C. and said, now that you've freed these folks, you got to educate them. And he talked to Congress, and they decided to create a university for blacks. And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to name that institution after you. The man's name was General Howard, and Howard University, right here in this city, was named after him. He was a white man. He was a white man. He was not a black man. Isn't that absolutely amazing? So we see, you never know it today, but you'd see that there's something powerful. Think about a couple more real quick things. In 1909, there's a major problem of lynching that was going on in America. A group of people got together and they said, we got to stop this lynching of blacks in our land. The group was white and Jewish. Many people were moneyed, and they decided to name the group they founded the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The NAACP was not begun by black folk. It was begun by a multiracial, multicultural group of people who said, on our watch, America is not going to dip to this low ebb. We're going to see it move in that agape kind of love. But this year we celebrated the march from Selma to Montgomery, and the folks who participated in that march, many of them were white. A guy named James Reeve from Boston was beat up by white extremists, and he gave his life for the cause. And then we also find that there is a woman who was born in Detroit. Her name was Viola Luiso, and she was a mother of 5 kids who was involved with administration and transportation. And after the Montgomery March, she was shot by KKK folk and died at the ripe young age of 39 years old. But she invested self-sacrificing love to make a difference. Let me close by saying there's something you and I can do together. I believe we're going to have a big dream. We need bridges to peace. We need all kinds of things, but we're going to have to dream a big dream, and we're going to have to believe that it's our collaborative, collective desire to see the nation healed. Secondly, we've got to find somebody who doesn't look like us racially or culturally that we're going to invest in. And those persons, we want to see them lifted up, like Harry Jackson Sr. did at his house. And I believe we can see a whole lot of people promoted and advanced. And then find a bridge. Find a place where you can build a bridge of peace and acceptance and gather some people, maybe it's from your church, maybe it's from your community, who will work together with you. And I believe that we can shift things in America. I want to close by quoting once again this quote from MLK and then asking you to repeat something back to me 3 times. It says, I decided to stick with love. Hate is too much a burden to bear. Can you say that last phrase with me 3 times? Hate is too much a burden. Hate is too much a burden to bear. Hate is too much a burden to bear. So I've decided to stick with love. Folks, we can change America by having a heart filled with love and practical, proven solutions. You and I, we can do it. We got this. God bless you.